Hey, welcome there, No Labels, No Limits podcast listeners. I wanted to tell you that today we have a very different, special kind of guest because we're going to talk about creatives. And I know many of you are that because when I hear from you, you talk about how do you do your work, be who you are in your own spaces, whether it's business or in a regular corporate environment or whatever. And I think when I introduce you to our guest today, you're going to find that he has a unique take on that. He's been very successful, and we'll just dive into that. But let me start here by telling you that David Speed is the founder of Graffiti Life, and it's a creative company that makes art of all kinds for big brands, both inside and out. And just so you know, David, as a heads up, when we come back, those are very intentional words, and I have a question for you about them. And his company was created with the mission of empowering artists and creatives. And that is still the core value that they operate from today. So David has just launched a new podcast called Creative Rebels. Love the name. And it debuted at #1 on the iTunes business charts. That is a big accomplishment, especially for a brand new podcast. So, David, welcome to the No Labels, No Limits podcast. I think you've been living the No Labels, No Limits life for a number of years. So with that, could you give a little more introduction to yourself for us?
Sure. Well, what an incredible introduction. When I knew I was coming on the show, that was one of the parts that I was most looking forward to because you do amazing intros for all your guests. So thank you. Yeah, I mean, you pretty much summed it up all in a nutshell there. I started Graffiti Life in 2010 because I've been a graffiti artist since the year 2000. So I've been using a spray can to create artwork for the past 19 years. And at the time of opening the business, I was feeling kind of disheartened with everything. Friends and peers were being sent to prison for doing this art form that I loved. And it was at that point that I realized I wasn't 16 anymore. I wasn't invincible anymore. And things were starting to get sort of very real. And I thought that graffiti was such a positive art form because although I was reading in newspapers these stories that were talking about all of the prison sentences that were being handed out, and they were using words like destruction and vandalism and all of these negative words. When we were actually painting in the streets and interacting with the public, it was overwhelmingly positive. And people were saying, this is amazing, this is beautiful, love what you're doing, you're brightening up the area. So there was a disconnect there for me. And I realized that there was one of the reasons we're called Graffiti Life is because it did literally change my life. The art form is so powerful. And so I wanted to do something positive. So that was why we started our business. We started in a cold, old, broken down shed with no money, eating noodles and kind of scraping together the pennies to survive. And we've gone on to work with Disney, Nike, Reebok, Adidas, L'Oreal, eBay, Microsoft, BMW, Mercedes, like just so many global brands. And the business worked. We're 9 years in now, and we've created something. And so we've grown from a team. There was 3 of us in the beginning. There's now 15 of us. The podcast was kind of born from that. Like, as you mentioned in your introduction, everything we do has always been around empowering artists and creatives. And so the podcast was, how can we do this at scale? We've managed to provide a career for 15 people, which is incredible. And we do want that to grow. But how can we sort of reach more and more people? And the podcast kind of like the obvious answer. So that was why we launched it. And it's gone on to do really well. So yeah, Creative Rebels on your podcast apps, you can find us. And so everything's going well, and it's fun.
So here's a question I have for you, and that is, it's interesting when you talk about how people are being sent to prison and the language around that, right? The destruction and all of that. Can you share with us how you or your community, and there's maybe a part A and part B question because I tend to ask really compound questions. So what I'm interested in understanding is, when you were just starting out and you were 16 and you got your spray can out there, did you consider yourself an artist? What did you consider yourself within the realm of art? And did you always think of it as graffiti, or was it murals? How did you think about that, I guess, is my question.
Sure. I don't think I had enough self-awareness at that age to really think about labeling and defining what I was doing. I knew that I I enjoyed what I was doing, and I knew that I was breaking the law. So when I first started painting, there were legal areas around London where you could go without being prosecuted. So there were sanctioned legal areas where I could paint without being pestered by the police. But gradually, one by one, those were getting shut down. And this is the early 2000s in London, in the UK. And so at that point, I was basically presented with a choice. You can either stop doing this, and I'd fallen in love with the art form. It just grabbed me. I just loved it. I loved taking my sketches that were small on paper and then blowing them up like 3, 4, 5 times the size onto a huge wall. That there was something about that for me that was just magical. So at that stage, I'm presented with this choice of you can either quit because there's no legal places for you to practice anymore, or you can do it illegally and run that risk. And at the time, the rewards outweighed the risks. I knew that I was painting in areas where I wasn't supposed to be, but I was a very considerate vandal. I never painted on people's property. I never painted on places of worship. The places where I painted would be sort of abandoned warehouses, the by the side of the railway lines on old walls. And I guess it was how I found myself when I was younger. And through the artwork, as I started to progress, because I was rubbish when I started, I was terrible. I wasn't very good. And just through relentless practice and determination to master this tool of the spray can, I just put in hours and hours and hours. And as I got better, that was when I sort of started to realize that I could do more, because people were more receptive to seeing what I could do, because they were looking at the strength of the artwork rather than the location in which it was placed. That makes sense.
It makes sense. So you actually had to put in a lot of time to build your craft, if you will, because the work that I show that you put on your website of the art, the murals, the different pieces, it's astounding. And when I've looked, and I've seen murals around in different cities, and I just think, wow, because, you talk about your sketches, but then putting them up. And for me, when something's on a little piece of paper, that's one concept, but then you make it up there and big, right? That's just a whole other scale. So how did you move from the small things to working? First of all, how did you move from working at that level to where it became a business and people were basically paying you to break the law, or giving you their walls and saying, hey, this is come here, right?
Yeah. I think there's this myth that people are born with talent, and I don't believe that there's any such thing as natural talent. I think that anyone who is good at something, it's because they practiced. And sometimes if we enjoy something, it doesn't feel like we're practicing, but we are practicing. And I think there's this, people say you're gifted. I mean, it's very lovely so painting in the streets, you get into a lot of conversations with people. And because you can't avoid it, you're in public. And so anyone can come up and talk to you, and they do. And so when I'm painting walls outside, people will come up and start conversations with me. And one of the things they say quite often is, you're so talented. And that's very sweet. And I accept that humbly. It's really nice that people say that. But I think it's like, that was hard work. What you're seeing on the wall is 19 years of experience, of trial and error, of failure, of experiments, of pushing past my comfort zones, and just progressing. And I'm nowhere near the complete artist that I want to be, which people always think that's funny when they look at my work. But I think as artists and creatives, we're never finished. We're never finished. Everything is something that we're working on. And I mean, that's why I love the name of your podcast. No labels, no limits. Everyone wants to label everything, and it's a human thing, and I get it. It's so that we can understand things quicker, and we can just sort of identify it as fast as possible. But I think people say, oh, I'm not artistic, so that therefore means that they're not creative. There's so many business owners that I know that are hugely creative. They don't happen to paint or write poetry or whatever that we kind of deem, oh, these are creative things. I mean, creativity is problem solving, and that's where my creativity has come from. I've seen a problem of, how do I create this image? How do I make it as kind of dynamic as I possibly can? That's creativity. It's a habit. It's practice. And it's just something that I've worked on and cultivated over a long period, because that's the other thing is people get disheartened when they don't see progression quick enough. And everything, it's just having that blind faith of knowing if I continue, I will get better. And I think most people just don't have what it takes to just keep going on that track. And that's part of my mission, is to just tell people to just keep going. People who keep going are the ones that win. It's simple as that. In business, in art, in everything.
Well, and the truth is, if you don't keep going, the one thing you're positive of, you're not getting anywhere. You're not going to ever have a chance of winning or achieving that goal, right? That's a certainty. You stop, you're done. So
100%.
Yeah, you might as well just, it's like, well, I'll just keep going. Who knows? And you're right. It cracks me up because I think about that. There will be people who I've known or have worked with, and all of a sudden their organization or they are getting all this notoriety because they're having great success. People going, how'd you do that? And I'm thinking, oh man, I know their history. They've done it through sweat, frustration, getting up, putting a smile on their face and going, this matters so much to me. I'm doing it. Right. So talk to me a little
100%.
bit about your partners. Because I know it's you, and then you've got a couple other folks that you started the business with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that I couldn't achieve anything that I've done alone. So I have two fantastic business partners who my partners in kind of everything that we do. So we have a couple of different businesses. We have a sort of an alternative advertising agency. We have a tattoo studio, randomly enough, and we have Graffiti Life. And one of my business partners is my co-host on the Creative Rebels podcast. And I think together we totally have each other's backs in terms of what I'm bad at, the other two are good at, and vice versa. And we have this perfect triangle of strengths and weaknesses. And so Adam's my business partner. He deals with all of our digital website related stuff, social media stuff, content, filming. He edits the podcast, tech minded. He's a very determined person, and he's a learner, as we all are, I guess. We all realize that if there's something that we are not good at, we can get good at it. So Adam will religiously sort of dedicate time to learning about sound, learning about editing, and he'll throw himself into that, and he does a great job. And our other business partner is Yona. And so Yona is a Welsh name, and she's the glue that holds our entire company together. She is, I don't even know where to start. So if ever there's a problem in the office, in our business, or in any of our businesses, we pretty much look to her for the answer, because she just seems to instinctively know. She just has a great mind for business, and she just knows which direction that things should go in. And for me, I don't really do much. I'm the loud mouth at the front who does the speaking gigs, and I interview the guests on the podcast, and I paint walls, and I guess I'm good at promoting and that sort of thing. But really, it's those two behind me that do all the real hard work.
It sounds like you got a great team, and you've been together pretty long. When you think about it, an arc of a company, that's saying something. Were all of you in that shed eating noodles together?
We were, yeah. There was a few more of us in the beginning, but we always say that the business kind of is its own animal, and it picks and chooses who it wants to keep, and people have fallen by the wayside. But I think we were the one just always were steadfast, and we had this belief, because nothing happens overnight. And there were some hard times in the beginning. I mentioned sort of our client list earlier. I mean, it wasn't day one, we put up a website and then all of a sudden Nike are knocking on our door. It doesn't happen like that. It's a long, slow process. Yeah, I know, right? I know.
We've just been waiting for that website to go up.
And the crazy thing is we all had wobbles at different times, and it was the other two that would get, the one who's having their wobble would get them through it, because there was a point. So believe it or not, whilst I was running down the railway lines, I was also teaching and training to become a primary school teacher. And so there was one stage in the beginning of the business where I just couldn't see the wood for the trees, and I was half considering going back to teaching, and I'd applied to do a course to further myself on that path, and all of the paperwork came through the post, and it was the other two that just sort of sat me down and said, look, this is going to work, we just have to keep going. And fortunately we did, and I listen to them. But literally, our company started. I hated it at the time, but it makes for a great story now. So I'm really happy it happened. But day one of our company, after Googling our business, because that's literally how, as business, we've just learned using the internet as we've gone along. The first thing I read was print off business cards. So we printed some business cards. I took a canvas and an easel to a busy high street and just started drawing on a canvas and handing out business cards to people. That's our business is built on that day. And I didn't want to do it. I was scared. I thought that people will not take this seriously. No one's going to pay for graffiti, and I'm not a good enough artist. I had all of the imposter syndrome and everything kicking in. But without that first step, if I hadn't have conquered that fear and gone out there and just stood out in the cold for 9 hours, just drawing on this canvas to try and grab some attention from people, had I not taken that first step, we wouldn't be here today. And I think that getting over those fears and holding fast in your beliefs that's what got us through. And I think a lot more people could get through if they could just hold on to that self-belief. And if you do have a good team around you that can pick you up when you're low, that becomes a lot easier.
David, when you focus on artists and creatives and, you talk about the empowering, right? How do you see that group, which can be a pretty broad and diverse group of people, artists and creatives, as you mentioned, how do you see that group differently? And maybe not even differently, but how do you see their needs different than maybe if you were in mainstream education or something? How do you help and address folks who are artists and creatives by nature and by internal design?
Sure. So I think through having the business for 9 years now, we've been contacted many times by different artists, different creatives that have essentially asked, how have you done this? And so on launching the podcast at number one of the main questions that we've been getting, and we've been getting a lot of DMs and emails, is how did you launch your podcast at number one? And you can literally Google how to launch a number one podcast. All of the information is out there. It involves learning about the iTunes algorithms. It involves building a network around you of influencers, quote unquote, of people who will share the podcast once it goes live so that you get an initial boost. All of the tactical information is out there. People ask us, how did you set up your business? How did you become successful in business? How did you get big clients? How do you price? All of that information is on Google. The thing that you can't just go and find is the stuff that's within, is the mindset, the determination, the grit. And those, there's a heap of podcasts and books and stuff out there that can help with that stuff. And I guess that's our aim. And I think that creative people, we focus on the products, on the art, on the craft. We focus on that a lot of times to the detriment of the marketing of the product. And they are an equation that go hand in hand together. There's two types of artists. There's people who want to be an artist for a hobby, and there's people who want to be a professional artist. And by proxy, saying you want to be a professional artist means that you have to make money from your art. And you will not make money from your art if you don't know how to market yourself. And I read in forums and on blog posts and stuff all the time, people saying like, I don't want to use social media. A lot of people just rule it out straight away. I don't want to use social media. It's icky, and I don't want to ask people for money. And I think a lot of it just comes down to mindset, understanding that. Think about how many people I've been able to help just through letting them know that we exist, and that all comes down to marketing. So it's so funny that how everything sort of ties itself together. But to help as many people as possible, we essentially have to sell them on the idea of listening to our podcast. We have to go, and how do you do that? You identify what it is that is troubling them and say, we can help you with this. So, and that's been a journey of us of just discovering over the past 9 years of running these creative companies. But I think that creative people do have, I think you get what you focus on, and a lot of creative people have in their heads this kind of limiting belief that I'm not a business person, I'm not good doing that, I'm not good at selling myself. And the more you tell yourself that, the more it will come true. So I think the problem that most creatives need is to just step outside of themselves and realize. And because what a lot of creatives will do is they'll just get an agent who will do all of that for them, which is perfect. If you can afford to outsource, then great. But if you can't, which I understand that for a lot of people it would be difficult to do that, it starts within, and that doesn't happen. Again, as with everything, it's a long journey. But just, I guess that's why I love the podcast, because every week it's just a little kick of every week, just one more little thing that I can learn, one more little thing that I can work on, by listening to someone else's story and seeing, oh, that's how they did it, and then they can apply that to their own sort of studies and everything.
Yeah, and even if you can afford to outsource everything, there's a loss in that in some respect, because even if you don't want to do it long term, and trust me, there's a lot of things as a business owner, I don't want to do them long term, but I do want to learn them. I don't want to have them be this bigger than life thing that I'm going, oh my God, how do you edit a podcast? It's like, well, like you said, you get some information, you get some lessons, and you do the best you can, and then you get better, right?
Yeah.
And then you're going, when someone says, oh, this is really technical, you're going, not really. It's not that tough, right? But you don't know that unless you push yourself. And so I do think that that's really important. And I do know, how great that you had the three of you, where you're talking about you have, like, when one person was down, the other two could be there. It's harder, but not impossible when you're on your own. And how would you suggest to a creative, if I came to you, not likely to happen with my art, but but I do consider myself creative, and said, what do I do with this? But I'm feeling down. How would you help me, or help me think about creating a community around me that would support me in that way that you've been lucky enough to have around you?
Sure. Well, I mean, Sarah, I know you are creative. I've seen your coloring book for a start, so I know you're definitely creative. But I think I would say that, first and foremost, you need to be your own cheerleader, because if you don't believe in your work, then how do you expect anyone else to? So it's understanding that you have a good product. I think that as soon as you get to the point where other people are liking and appreciating your work, you don't have to be a master yet, because everyone's on a journey, and I don't feel like I'm a master. So, because I was talking to a young artist about this recently, and she's a tattoo artist, and she's doing great work, and she's building quite a following on Instagram, and she's getting clients. She's getting people are booking her in, and she is tattooing them. And she was complaining to me about how she's not good enough yet. I'm not a good enough artist, imposter syndrome. And I said, well, I grabbed her phone and was like, right, let's look at your Instagram feed. So we go to her Instagram feed, and she's following the best tattoo artists who are all 10, 15, 20 years older than her, that have a wealth of work in their back pocket that has brought them up to this stage. And I said, every day you wake up and you look at your Instagram feed, and you're looking at people who are further along in their journeys than you. And then you look in your sketchbook and you say, I'm not at that level, so I'm not good enough. However, you are at the level where you have paying clients. They want to give you money to make art that's going to be on their skin for the rest of their lives. I was like, do you not think that is an endorsement? And she said, well, yeah, I guess it kind of is, yeah. And I was like, yes, it absolutely is. So I think be your own cheerleader and have self-belief, but then social media to build a following. Build a tribe around you that believes in what you are doing, because the one strength a single person has is that they are them. They're on their journey. And so taking whoever it is that you are, finding your style, which happens through practice. And that's one thing that a lot of artists who are sort of really, really early on in their career often say to me, is like, how do I find my style? And that's just a case of just practicing and just experimenting, and you fall into it by keeping going, which seems to be the theme of this podcast so far. But by keeping going, you'll experiment, and you'll find what works for you, and more importantly, you'll find what resonates with other people. The other day, there's this artist I follow, and I love this. I loved how he framed this. He wrote, just reached 10K followers. It's only taken me 3 years. So happy. And I love that. I love that he framed it that it's only taken me 3 years, because most people, when you say to them, right, you're starting your art Instagram page now, in 3 years' time, you're going to be at 10K. They want it next week. And they're like, 3 years. And that feels like a long time. I mean, if you're going to live till you're 100, then 3 years is a very, very short amount of time to invest into your career. And I think that we need to stop focusing on this instant gratification, comparing ourselves to other people, and just, even if you've got 100 followers that are interacting, like that's so valuable, and it will grow if you keep going.
Well, and here's the irony of wanting something that's bigger than you're ready for, it can sink you. So you have 10,000 people, but you don't have that extra 15 years behind you, or maybe a team. What are you going to do when everybody starts reaching out to you and says, I need your work? You're going to be saying, oh, slow down just a little. I don't have the systems. I don't know. So, I mean, part of that apprenticeship or the
100%.
self, it takes time.
Sure. I think that there's a lot of people who are searching for this viral, I want to go viral. And that comes with certain consequences. And one of those consequences is, or if all of a sudden there's eyes on your artwork, or whatever it be, there's eyes on your craft because you've gone viral, that all of a sudden brings in people who haven't been following you. And so they don't understand you, and they don't know your story. So they can be very judgmental of something that they're not fully invested in. Whereas the people that you've grown gradually, one by one, person by person, they're the people who are going to stick with you through thin and thin, because people like to write and so support you early on, and they discovered you. People love to say, oh, I found that band before no one had heard their music. People love to say that. So your early followers and supporters are some of your most valuable supporters that will because they'll follow you through thick and thin because they want to be right. So I think going viral can have actually very negative consequences because you're not ready for it. And you're not ready for this sudden influx of eyeballs on your craft.
There's a gal who actually I met her through the podcast, which is cool, like you, right? You get to meet and learn from people every week. But that's not how I met her. I didn't meet her because she was an artist. I met her because of her philosophy and how she approaches some stuff. But she's been sharing some of her artwork. And I'm thinking, are these sketches? Are these traces? Where the heck are these coming from, right? They're beautiful, but they're like, and they're evocative and they're different. So I says, can I please use these and share them on the internet? Because they're beautiful, right? They just gave me chills when I looked at it. But that's that same thing. I will follow her forever because I know those things. That's her baby steps. I can't wait till she's like fully out there and going, oh yeah, I remember those. Those were nice. Those were nice. And they're beautiful. I'm thinking, yeah, this just the beginning for this gal. So that's exciting. Like you said, you do stay connected to folks in that way. I want to ask you about some of your social causes, because I know you work in other countries and you've done some work around the world to benefit or lift up voices of specific social causes. Can you talk a little bit about that work? And then how do you choose where you spend your time and energies doing that?
Yeah, sure. So what we decided to do, so as I mentioned, there's 15 of us working in our studio in Shoreditch every day. And so what we decided to do is split everyone up and give everyone a month of the year where they could run their own campaign. Because what we didn't want to do is kind of dictate from the top, like, our Graffiti Life's charity is whichever one, it's one for homelessness, and that's what we're going to focus on. We decided to do, okay, everyone can choose a charity that they care about. We do quite a lot of advertising work, so we do hand-painted billboards. And it's a great product because when a brand advertises with us through painting it, people actually interact with the artwork and they actually share it. And I think that's quite rare. People don't take photos of posters, but they do take photos of our artwork. So in terms as like if a brand's interested in that, it works very well because it does the job that a poster doesn't really do anymore because we see so many. And so what we've decided to do is with some of the money that we get for advertising projects is kind of offset that and put that into some of the causes that we actually really care about. But we've given, like I say, each member of staff has a space of time where they can do their own campaign. And so we've done some amazing campaigns. So we've worked for the World Wildlife Fund. We painted this gigantic tiger in Shoreditch. It was one of our most sort of photographed and shared pieces of artwork. It went all over the place. And to promote the fact that there's less than 3,000 tigers left in the wild. Which is obviously a reassuring statistic. And so that was a really great one. Currently, one of our artists is in Brazil. She's working on a highway in Brazil that is the most affected area in the world for child prostitution. And it's such a fantastic project. We've just written a blog post about it, actually, which is on graffitilife.co.uk on the blog section. And one of our artists, Sophie, is in Brazil currently, and she's working with some of the young girls that have been affected and creating just murals, bringing beautiful light and color into this like really dark, awful place in the world. And hopefully through doing that, we will raise a ton of awareness around this area and around the charity that we're partnered with that are kind of working to stop this. And so I think it gives us a chance to give something back. I think street art is such a powerful medium that we can really make people pay attention. And so, I mean, one of our members of staff did a project on volunteering, just on the importance. She's a volunteer every weekend. She gives out food at a soup kitchen, and so she did a mural about volunteering. We had one of our other artists painted a huge wall for a mental health charity on Mental Health Awareness Day to promote all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's just a great opportunity that for us to actually do something about causes that we care about. But it is hard because there is so much that we could be doing. And we do get contacted by charities all the time, and this is the difficult thing. And you have to weigh up your time, because at the end of the day, we are also running a business, and we do have to make payroll for 15 members of staff every month. We do have to pay our rent and keep the lights on. So it's very difficult, because if I had my way, we probably would just be doing charity walls 7, because they're the most fun. We get so much interaction on them, and you can see how much they help and affect and move people. So yeah, we'd like to do more, but we do what we can. We definitely do the most that we can, which I'm really proud of, and I'm proud of all the guys for just getting motivated behind this, because it's an awesome thing.
I think that's pretty fantastic that staff get to drive that, your team gets to drive that, and in the creative and what matters. The other thing is, maybe what would be so cool is because a lot of foundations fund stuff like that. Someone would say, well, money, you should be paid for doing that work. So we will pay you like one of your big clients, and you can go work with these charities. So if you're out there listening to this podcast and you're a foundation, especially in the arts, I think you ought to ring David up and have a chat, or maybe as business partners. I don't know. It depends. But I just think there's opportunity. Right. And maybe people haven't thought about that's for me. That's like my brain starts going, no, that's not a barrier. That's just a limitation right now. But that's cool.
So we have worked with big companies who have supported stuff like that, which has been great, because that is the best of both worlds, because then they're helping artists by fund, and they're also helping the charity. So we did a big project with the Bank of America, and I know there's a lot of people have. I mean, there's. If you look into any company, I'm sure you can find things that you don't agree with certain companies. But I am more than happy to accept Bank of America's money if I can take bad money and turn it good. No offense, Bank of America, but if I can help artists, like using their CSR departments, corporate social responsibility, to create artworks to brighten up towns, to do community regeneration, to help any number of charities and events, then I will absolutely do that. And it's definitely something that we do look at and we are involved in.
I think that's fantastic. So I want to circle you back to something you said in the beginning about how here you are 16, you're making a choice between breaking the law or stopping what you're doing. Has the conversation around graffiti changed over these past 19 years? Are people still being called vandals and destructive people, or is any of that changing?
It has changed massively, I think. So when we started the company, 2010, street art was a very, very new term. And if I went back in time, I might name our company something to do with street art, because I think it more accurately represents what we do now. But I mean, if I named the name, I came from graffiti, and it has changed my life. But yeah, I think that this new term street art was kind of ushering in this acceptance of what the artists were doing. And then the graffiti label started to be used just on the kind of tagging and stuff like that. So, but there's certainly been, I mean, you can buy coffee table books with graffiti, and now it's gone mainstream, I guess. There's just so it's printed onto coffee cups, and I mean, it's used everywhere. And we're now able to make our living doing it. So it's massively changed. When I first started painting, graffiti was not a career option. There just wasn't a market for it because I don't think enough people understood it. I think the internet has played a massive part in that. So I started painting in '99. There was an internet, but it wasn't what it is now. And so through those early sort of 2000s, when people started to get on forums and things like that was when the art form started to evolve, because we were learning from online rather than just what was around we were seeing in front of us. Because in the beginning, we were just learning from other artists around London because that was all we could see. So I think art form evolved and became more complex, and the artists pushed themselves further and started competing globally rather than locally. Everything moved on, public acceptance changed, and more councils and local areas started to be more accepting of it. Certainly, there's areas all over the world. There's Wynwood in Miami, there's Melbourne. There's definitely cultural hubs that totally street art and graffiti, and they encourage it because they know that it brings in tourism because people go to take photos of the artwork. So it's changed massively, and had it not changed, I don't think there would be a market for this. I don't think our clients would want to have graffiti painted in their office, or would want to come and do a workshop with us where they learn how to do graffiti, because it wouldn't be popular, so it wouldn't happen. But it fortunately for us, I think with so many businesses, they just came about at the right time. I think if you look at so many successful businesses over the years, I mean, Microsoft is such a key example when you look into Bill Gates' story of just happening to start learning programming when there was a computer available in his library that he was able to go to and use. And just that perfect timing was what set up the business. For us, it was definitely a case of timing. I wasn't ready to set up a business when I was 18, 19, 20, but as the time of it becoming accepted and me being ready to start the business, the two coincided at the perfect time.
I want to take you back to that time when you were younger. And if you were to meet yourself today, and the younger David does not know any of what you know now, is there any kind of tip or encouragement that you would give him and his friends about how to just to be who he is? What piece of wisdom would you share?
Yeah, it depends how long I have with them. But I think that your journey, like every step that you take, gets you to where you are. So I wouldn't necessarily change anything, because our failures have made us stronger, and we're no longer vulnerable in those areas where we failed in the past, because we've been able to learn from our mistakes and adapt. So I wouldn't necessarily want to be forewarning of anything that was coming. I think it's just a confidence issue, and believe that if you keep going, great things will come. I would probably say do less of what you don't care about. Do what lights you up inside. I think what I know now is that, like, now I'm very disciplined, and I only do what forwards me towards my goals. I mean, pretty much religiously. I'm in love with the process of working. I mean, currently, as we record this is a Saturday night here in the UK, and I know a lot of people are out partying and drinking. I'm in the middle of writing a blog for Creative Rebels. So I'm in love with the process, with creating and helping people. And so I think I would say, don't waste time. Just crack on with what it is that you know that you're meant for, and just keep on religiously, relentlessly on that track.
So, David, I think on that note, we'll wrap. I want to encourage people to go and listen to your podcast. I'm excited about it. And when I looked at all the titles, I'm going, oh man, how come I didn't know about this? So it sounds really engaging. I'm looking forward to listening to the two of you as co-hosts also. That's something I'm thinking, yeah, that'd be fun to bring in guest co-hosts. The other thing that I really hope people will do is go to your website, Graffiti Life, because you'll see just some of what they're doing and the pictures, but it is very inspirational to me. And I also just think it's kind of magic that I get to have my Saturday. So many people they're going, what are you doing tomorrow? I'm going, I have a podcast, right? It's like, I'm interviewing. What else would I be doing on a Saturday, right? It's snowing, it's cold. I'm interviewing. So I so appreciate your dedication to who you are and being real about that and what you're doing in the world, because I do know it'll make a big difference. There are people who need to hear exactly what you said today, and I'm one of them. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's it for this week's edition of the No Labels, No Limits podcast. We hope you liked what you heard, and if you did, we ask that you go over to iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever else you listen to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. If you know someone who would enjoy this podcast, please be sure to share. And until next time, have a great week living a no labels, no limits, and no excuses life.